Good day, class. So for today's lesson, we will discuss Module 1 in our subject Philippine Politics and Governance. Module 1 Historical Background of Philippine Democratic Politics. So at the end of our lesson, students should be able to relate the evolution of Philippine politics and governance, describe the different stages in the evolution of the Philippine politics and governance, analyze the evolution of Philippine politics and governance, assess the effects of colonial experience on the Philippine politics and governance, and appraise the influence of prior stages of Philippine political developments on contemporary Philippine politics. Let us now proceed to the pre-Spanish colonization. So the political aspect and system started from the very beginning of the colonization of the Spaniards, so also known as the pre-Spanish colonization. So the form of government during the pre-Spanish Philippines was monarchical in character, with the datu. So when we say monarchical, it means it is ruled by only one person, like a queen or a king in other country, just like in Europe. But here in the Philippines, here in our country, it was governed by a datu. Datu is the title for chiefs, sovereign prince or princess, and monarch throughout the Philippine archipelago, and act as a king in his whole territory. He inherited his position from being a dato from his father, whose family belonged to a maharlika, the royal-blooded sector of the society. So, ibig sabihin lang nito na namanan niya ang pagiging dato niya sa kanyang tatay, na nabibilang sa angkan ng mayayaman o tinatawag nating maharlika, a royal-blooded sector, or nasa mataas na katungkulan sa kanyang sinasakupan. So the society called Balangay was constituted of about 50 to 100 families who were independent from one another, from the Greek city-state of the early civilization. In pre-Spanish colonization, the people were divided into social classes. Namely, the first one we have the maharlika. Maharlika, or the noble, also considered as the royal-blooded. So in addition to this, maharlika would provide protection to the barangay and were responsible for providing and preparing the weapons at their own expense. A maharlika could change their allegiance to another barangay by marrying into it or by simply moving from one place as their privilege. Next, we have the middle class, the freemen, or also called timawa. So timawa were primarily a feudal warrior class, required to provide military service to the datu in hunts, raids, wars, and defense. Timawa paid tribute or taxes, or paid taxes to the datu, known as buwis or handog, and were required to provide agricultural labor as needed by the community. Next, we have the alipin, or slaves, which was further divided into two, namely aliping namamahay, with limited human rights as they could not be sold, and aliping sagigilid with no human rights at all, as they were considered mere property, could be sold and even buried alive with their dead masters. So, in addition to this, ang aliping namamahay was a servant that lived in their own little house on the property of their master, while aliping sagigilid was a servant that lived around the house of their master. So, in a political state in the pre-Spanish colonization, or in the pre-Spanish period in the Philippines, we have the so-called the rule of the jungle. So when the dato died with no heir to his position, or kapag walang maipamanahan ang dato sa kanyang kapangyarihan, for example dahil wala siyang naging anak sa kanyang asawa, the succession was done through the root politics, with the rule of the jungle, whereby the one that was physically strongest and perhaps the most cunning and came out as the winner from usually a bloody confrontation would be hailed as the new dato. So ibig sabihin, maglalaban-laban hanggang kamatayan ang mga miyembro ng maharlika na kapag kamag-anakan din ng dato para makamit ang kapangyarihan ng pagiging isang dato. So ganun yung rule of the jungle. Just like an animal, they are fighting for a throne. So slavery is inherited in the sense that the children of the slave were born slave. So pag pinanganak ang alipin, mamamatay ka rin isang alipin. But they could liberate themselves by reward, by paying for their freedom or for their liberty, and or by fighting to death for their freedom and prevailed as a survivor. In addition to this, in the rule of the jungle, the economic system was basically agricultural and feudal in character. So ang pangunahing sistema pang-ekonomiya ay pagsasaka tulad ng pagtatanim at pangingisda, at kasama na rin ang pagpapalitan ng iba't ibang produkto, or what we call this the barter trade. The religion was paganism, na ang ibig sabihin ay sumasamba sila sa mga anito or sa araw, sa buwan, sa punong kahoy, at kahit sa anong bagay na maituturing or tinuturing nilang Diyos, o mas kilala sa tawag na bathala. So the judicial system was by means of trial or ordeal, which was basically founded on mere belief that the innocent would be spared from harm by the Almighty. So for example, if an accused person to submit to a dangerous or painful test on the jury, that God would intervene and disclose his or her guilt or innocence. So mismo ang Diyos ang magliligtas sa kanya. Okay, so sa simula ng pagdating ng mga Espanyol dito sa Pilipinas, or the Spanish period, the coming of Ferdinand Magellan into the Philippines in 1521 and the succeeding Spanish expedition into the Orient paved the way for the establishment of the unitary and centralized form of government in the Philippines. So the unitary form of government na ito ay namana pa natin sa mga Kastila na sa hanggang ngayon ay ginagamit pa rin natin para pamahalaan ang ating bansang Pilipinas. So by subduing all the balangays. So balangays ay isang sasakyan pandagat na kalaunan inahango sa isang territory which is later on could be stated as barangay. The Philippines was said to be conquered by Spain with a sword and the cross. A cross, which means Christianity, or by means of religion, thereby reduced the Filipinos into vicious, corrupt, and exploitative race of slavery. So sa ilalim yung mga Pilipino sa kamay ng mga dayuhang Espanyol. So in addition to this, the coming of Ferdinand Magellan into the Philippines in 1521 and the succeeding Spanish expeditions, wherein the Magellan's expedition was undertaken because the Spaniards were looking for alternate routes to the east, wanted to discover the Moluccas, or the Spice Island, the land with spices and gold, and wanted to expand Spanish territory and spread Christianity. And dahil sa paglalayag nila na yun, they wanted to search for a particular place like Moluccas or Spice Island. Fortunately, they discovered the Philippines. They came to our country, Philippines. Okay, so the economy was highly feudal in character, with the encomienda system mostly owned by friars and or Spanish soldier. So ang encomienda or encomienda system ay isang sistema ng pag-angkin ng lupa ng mga praile at ng mga sundalong Kastila. Maituturing na makapangyarihan sa panahon ng pananakop ng mga Kastila ang mga praile. So sa sistemang ito, pwersahang pinagtatrabaho ang mga katutubong Pilipino lingid sa kanilang sariling kagustuhan, tulad ng pagsasaka, pagtatayo ng mga gusali, lalong-lalo na ang mga simbahan, pagtatanim at pangingisda, kung saan pinamumunuan din ang mga mapang-abusong mga praile. So the legislative function was with the Spanish Cortes in Spain, which enacted laws for the colony. So yun yung nagpapatupad ng batas. Under tayo ng soberanya na nanggaling sa Espanya. Under tayo ng Spain. And executed in the Philippines by the government general under the influence of the friars solely for their own advantage. So yung namumuno or counterpart ng as a president ay tinatawag nating Governor General. So being the chief executive, the Governor General enforced Spanish laws and royal decrees in the Philippines. He appointed all subordinate officials including Alcalde Mayor or Alcaldes Mayors, or simply called Provincial Governor. For his legislative power, he enacted and issued laws, regulation, and decree. The social classes were composed of the peninsulares, who were the elite members of the society, being constituted of the Spaniards who came into the Philippines to amass wealth. Sa makatuwid, ang peninsulares or peninsulares ang tawag sa Espanyol na ipinanganak sa Espanya. The middle class, who were called insulares, mostly constituted to the mestizos as half Filipinos and half Spaniards, brought about by the mingling of the Spaniards who had sexual relation with a Filipino woman. So insulares ang tawag sa mga Espanyol na ipinanganak sa Pilipinas na maituturing o mas kilala sa tawag na Creoles or Creoles. And the last one, we have the Indio. They were the Filipino people who were practically reduced to slavery. Ibig sabihin ng Indio ay mga katutubong Pilipino. Dito talaga ipinanganak at walang bahid ng pagiging dugong Kastila. So in general, Indio ang tawag ng mga Espanyol sa mga katutubo na naninirahan sa mga lugar o bansa na sinakop nila. Maituturing na mababang klase ng lebel ng tao sa lipunan ang isang Indio. Walang pinag-aralan, karamihan ay hindi nakapag-aral at nasa mahihirap na sektor ng lipunan. They are the natives. Next, we have the birth of the Philippine Revolution. So the oppressive rule of Spaniards in the Philippines induced the Filipino people to initiate reforms. So ibig sabihin ng reforms, no? Gusto ng mga Pilipino na may mabago sa sistema pinapatupad ng mga praile. So yung praile kasi yung nagkokontrol, no, ng sistema na pinapatupad dito sa Pilipinas, at ilan sa mga sistemang iyon ay lingid sa kaalaman ng kanilang bansang Espanya. So ayon sa kasaysayan, nagkaroon ng mga Pilipinong reformista dahil sa adhikain nilang baguhin ang sistema ng gobyerno sa kamay ng mapang-abusong mga praile at magkaroon ng kalayaan ang mga Pilipino. So sinagawa nila ito sa pagbuo ng propaganda movement. So isang kilusang magpapahayag ng katotohanan sa totoong sitwasyon ng mga Pilipino sa kamay ng mga dayuhan o sa kamay ng mapang-abusong mga praile. So isa sa mga tanyag na reformista ay sina Dr. Jose Rizal, na kilala natin bilang ating pambansang bayani, na nagtatag ng La Liga Pilipina. We have also Marcelo H. Del Pilar, Apolinario Mabine, Graciano Lopez Haina at iba pa na ang naging dahilan ay ang ipaglaban ang ating sariling bayan. So ang pagkamatay ng ating pambansang bayani ang pumukaw talaga sa kamalayan ng bawat Pilipino na ipaglaban ang sariling bansa na nagdulot ng damdaming nasyonalismo. So dahil dito sa mga reformista, nabago ang pananaw ng mga katutubong Pilipino at mas nanaig ang damdamin nilang nasyonalismo, na ibig sabihin pagmamahal sa sariling bayan, at gusto nilang magkaroon ng independence or kalayaan sa kamay ng mga mananakop na Kastila. So nagkaroon ng reformista dahil na rin sa pagbubukas ng Suez Canal. Ilan sa mga reformista na to, na sina Dr. Jose Rizal at iba pa, ay kabilang sa mga ilustrado o rangkan ng mga mayayamang level ng tao or class of people dito sa Pilipinas. So kilala si Rizal na nanggaling sa mayamang pamilya na nakapag-aral sa Europa. So dahil na rin sa pagbukas ng Suez Canal, no, kapag-aral sila sa Europa, nalaman nila na doon sa Europa, they can express their own ideas and philosophical aspect to change the government. So in Europa, no, there is a difference, no, in the system of government. So doon sa Europa, mas naipapahayag ng mga tao ang gusto nila sa kanilang gobyerno, ang gusto nilang baguhin sa kanilang gobyerno, Unlike dito sa Pilipinas, dahil noong panahong iyon, sakop pa tayo ng mga Kastila. So in addition to this, after the Spanish arrested Rizal in July 1892, Bonifacio decided that the Philippines would only achieve independence through revolution. On July 7, he founded Katipunan, a secret society. So the Spanish insensitivity to the Filipino grievances ignited the formation of Katipunan Society, which advocated for the independence from Spain via a bloody revolution. So ginamit na pamamaraan ni Andres Bonifacio sa pakikipagdigma ay ang dahas, no? Gumamit siya ng dahas para labanan ang mga Kastila, no? In terms of armed forces. So it is different from what Jose Rizal, no? Practice about fighting for Spain. The Filipino reformists use pens, no? Yung pagsusulat ng mga kaalaman nila at mga idealismo nila laban sa mga Kastila para maipahatid ang tunay na nangyayari dito sa Pilipinas. So thus, the first revolutionary government as the first republic was established with the President Emilio Aguinaldo as president. So it was proclaimed on June 12, 1898. Next. So the first republic, however, was short-lived with the advent of Americans, whose military rule in the Philippines started on April 14, 1898. No? The first republic na pinamunuan ni Emilio Aguinaldo ay agad ding napalitan dahil dumating na dito yung mga mananakop na Amerikano. So when the first republic was proclaimed at Kawit, Cavite on June 12, 1898, there were already American soldiers in the Philippines who made it appear that they came to collaborate with the Filipino people in their fight against Spain. So kunwari, no, kakampi natin yung mga Amerikanong sundalo laban sa mga Espanyol, no? So tinanggap ng pamahalaan ng First Republic ang mga American soldier. Pero hindi nila alam na gusto din sakupin ng mga Amerikano ang Pilipinas. But later on, they unmasked their true intent and issued Philippine-American War. As expected, the Filipino soldiers under Aguinaldo, who fought amidst treachery against one another, were defeated to give way to the establishment of the Philippines, the American civil government from 1901 to 1935. Okay, so dahil under na tayo sa American colonization, they formed this so-called Commonwealth government. So from 1898 to 1935, the Filipino people relentlessly and steadfastly fought for freedom from war to diplomatic struggle, which resulted to the establishment of the Commonwealth government, which provided for a 10-year transition towards a fully independent country. So the Commonwealth government, which was presidential in form with bicameral legislature, was inaugurated on November 15, 1935 with Manuel L. Quezon as president, in consonance with the Tidings-McDuffie Law. So before this happened, sa taong August 29, 1916, we have the Philippine Bill of 1902 na pinalitan ng Philippine Autonomy Act na mas kilala bilang Jones Law Act, na hango sa pangalan ng may akdang ng batas na ito na si Congressman William Atkinson Jones. So in this law, naitatag sa Pilipinas ang sistema ng pamamahalaan tulad ng sa US na binubuo ng Governor General ng Amerikano at ang lehislaturang binubuo ng mababa at mataas na kapulungan na inihalal ng mga tao. So ang mataas na kapulungan ay tinatawag na Senado. Samantala ang mababang kapulungan naman ay ang kapulungan ng mga kinatawan. So ang Jones Act ay nagbigay ng pag-asa sa mga Pilipino sa napipintong paggawad ng kalayaan dito sa Pilipinas. Sa panimula ng nasabing batas, nakasaad na tatanggalin na ng US ang kapangyarihan nito sa Pilipinas kapag naitatag na ang isang matatag na pamahalaan. O ibig sabihin lang nito, kapag nakita na ng mga Amerikano na kaya na nating pamahalaan yung ating sariling bayan, yung ating sariling bansa, no? Kaya na nating patakbuhin ang ating sariling bansa. So sa Jones Law Act then give way to the approval of Harry-Hawes cutting and Tidings-McDuffie Law. So dito na nabuo yung Tidings-McDuffie Law in accordance to the Harry-Hawes cutting. So sa pag-aproba ng Tidings-McDuffie Law, napanatili ni Manuel Quezon ang pamumuno sa Partidong Nasyonalista. Kasunod din dito ang pagkakaroon ng halalan para sa magiging kasapi ng convention constitutional na gagawa ng konstitusyon para sa Commonwealth. So ang batas Tidings-McDuffie Law ay isang federal na batas ng US. Okay? Isa siyang federal na batas ng US na nakapaloob ng pagsasarili ng pamahalaan ng Pilipinas. So, an independent government, no? At ang kalayaan nito mula sa US or Estados Unidos pagkatapos ng 10 taong under tayo sa pamumuno ng mga dayuhang Amerikano.